Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving straight into the life of a man whose stubborn, absolute genius completely re-engineered how humanity moves across the Earth. We're talking, of course, about Carl Benz. Now I want you to just imagine for a second taking a road trip in a vehicle that packs less than 1 horsepower. Where would you even stop to buy gas? You really have to wrap your head around the sheer paradigm shift required in the 1880s to even conceptualize driving a horseless carriage. There were 0 gas stations, there were no paved highways. It was a world entirely dependent on horses and trains. Changing that reality, well, that required immense vision and a whole lot of resilience. Let's kick things off with Section 1, the early struggles. Before he was a titan of industry, Carl Benz actually lived out a classic hero's journey, starting from incredibly humble beginnings. Born in 1844 in near poverty, he tragically lost his father to pneumonia when he was just 2 years old. But his mother, she pushed incredibly hard to give him a brilliant education. Originally studying locksmithing, he pivoted over to locomotive engineering. And get this, he passed his mechanical engineering entrance exams at the age of 15. But as we know, genius doesn't mean instant success. By 1871, his first iron foundry business had completely failed, mostly due to an unreliable partner. Yet he fought through that hardship, and finally, in 1880, he was granted his first 2-stroke engine patent. There's a pretty stark contrast here between his mechanical genius and his early business naivete. In 1882, the banks actually forced him to incorporate his enterprise, but the agreements were just terrible for him. He was left with merely 5% of the shares and a modest position as director. But the worst part, his design ideas were being completely ignored by the other board members. Frustrated, he simply walked away and left his own company just 1 year later. Moving right along to Section 2, the patent motor wagon. You really can't keep a brilliant inventor down for long. After founding a brand new company, Benz & C, in 1883, he unveiled the 1885 Benz patent motorwagen. Its total horsepower, just 0.8. Yet this extraordinary little machine is universally considered the very first practical, modern automobile. And the thing is, he didn't just take a heavy wooden horse carriage and lazily strap an engine to it. No, inspired by his fondness for bicycles, he used a super lightweight tubular steel frame and 3-wire wheels instead of those clunky, heavy wooden ones. He added an advanced electric coil ignition and a water-cooled 4-stroke engine that he designed himself. It was quite literally a revolutionary package. Which brings us to Section 3, Bertha's historic drive. So an amazing invention on paper still needs to be proven out there in the real world, right? That required the absolutely crucial human catalyst of this story, Carl's wife, Bertha Benz. She had actually previously used her own dowry to fund his business. Well, in August of 1888, she decided the world needed to see exactly what the motor wagon could do. Without Carl even knowing, she packed up their 2 teenage sons and took off on a 104-kilometer adventure in the Model 2. Because gas stations weren't a thing yet, she literally had to stop at local pharmacies along the route to buy solvent to use as fuel. And when the wooden brakes started failing on downhill slopes, she just stopped at a shoemaker and had him nail leather onto the blocks, inventing leather brake pads entirely on the fly. She fixed mechanical problems herself, and finally sent Carl a telegram upon their safe arrival at nightfall. Bertha's daring road trip was basically the ultimate historical act of life marketing. She proved to the world, and honestly to Carl himself, that the automobile wasn't just some quirky novelty. It was a safe, viable, and incredibly useful machine for long-distance travel. Let's dive into Section 4, Building an Empire. Bertha's proof of concept was the exact spark that ignited an industrial explosion. Carl transitioned incredibly fast from a solitary, struggling inventor to a full-blown global industrialist. Check this out. Benz & C went from producing 572 units in 1899 to an unbelievable 3,480 units by 1904. By the very end of the 19th century, Benz was literally the largest automobile company in the entire world. This massive growth was driven by some very specific, highly successful models. In 1893, he sold 85 units of the 2-seat Victoria model, which finally had a 3-horsepower engine. But the real game changer? That was the Velocipede, or Velo, introduced in 1894 with a 1.5-horsepower engine. Churning out over 1,200 units, the Velo is widely considered by historians to be the very first mass-produced car in history. But he didn't stop at passenger cars, not even close. In 1895, Benz rapidly expanded his empire by designing the very first truck with an internal combustion engine. That exact same year, he built the first motor buses in history for the Netfinger Bus Company. He was laying down the physical infrastructure of modern commerce and public transit as we know it today. And his engineering brain, it literally never turned off. In 1896, he patented the Boxer engine. Now, this is a flat engine design with horizontally opposed pistons that perfectly balance each other's momentum. It's a design so remarkably effective and brilliant that it's still being used today in modern high-performance vehicles from brands you definitely know, like Porsche and Subaru.
That brings us to Section 5, the need for speed.
Of course, once you build a great engine, someone is going to want to race the thing. As fierce rivals like Daimler Motorengesellschaft began to challenge Benz's leadership, motorsports became an absolutely vital way to gain massive publicity. Think about this shocking technological leap for a second. In 1885, the original patent motorwagen topped out at just 16 kilometers per hour. Just over 2 decades later, the 1909 Blitzen-Benz featured a massive 21.5-liter engine and hit a mind-bending top speed of 226.91 kilometers per hour. When that Blitzen-Benz set the land speed record at the Brooklands track in 1909, it was officially declared faster than any plane, train, or automobile at the time. And you know what's even more impressive? That speed record remained entirely unbroken by any other vehicle for a full 10 years. Just incredible. Finally, we reach Section 6, the Mercedes-Benz legacy. By the 1920s, Germany was plunged into a severe economic crisis and rampant hyperinflation. To put that into perspective, at one point in 1923, an average automobile cost 25 million marks. Survival meant adaptation. So in 1926, Benz and CE executed a historic mega merger with their longtime rival, Daimler Motorengesellschaft. Together, they standardized production and branded all their combined vehicles under a brand new name, Mercedes-Benz. Even that iconic logo was a compromise, combining Daimler's 3-pointed star with the traditional laurel wreath from the Benz logo. Carl Benz himself remained a director on the board of this new megacorporation until his death in 1929. And this brings us to his ultimate legacy. Today, he is universally recognized as the father of the automobile. His life is the absolute definition of a hero's journey. From a near-bankrupt engineer who got pushed out of his own early company to the visionary who literally built the foundation of global automotive transport. So, I'm going to leave you with this question to ponder. We just watched Carl Benz take us from a 0.8 horsepower tricycle that required trips to the pharmacy for fuel, all the way to a high-speed global empire. Looking at the incredibly rapid pace of that innovation, how do you think the next 100 years of transportation will evolve? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep wondering, keep learning, and I'll see you next time.